Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
Your co-host, Rich Gear, and we've got a whale of a show for you tonight, I guess, Doug. And it's whale evolution dives to a new low or sinks to a new low. What do you want to title this one?
Whale evolution sinks to a new low.
Okay.
So that's the article. One of the articles we are reviewing right now.
Okay.
Is whale evolution dives to a new low, but we're going to say it sinks to a new low.
All right, yeah.
Because it's really very interesting to see the machinations that evolutionists come up with to explain how certain organisms evolved. Now, it's interesting to me that the very first creature that the Bible mentions, specifically when it talks about the creation in Genesis, are the whales.
Well, yeah, I've heard it translated different ways, though. Generally, it's translated whales, but sometimes it's translated sea monsters. Sometimes it's translated sea dragons.
Right.
But I'm not sure. They're probably all involved. We've made a note of it in previous shows that the Bible doesn't make the same distinctions as, let's say, modern biological taxonomy does necessarily. Right. And that can get us into a world of hurt and trouble when you try to, basically seagoing creatures would have described a certain way. Yeah, like for instance, we talk about dragons, for instance, okay?
Right.
They wouldn't have distinguished between a Komodo dragon and a T-Rex.
Right.
Okay? Yeah. They wouldn't make a distinction between a serpent, a snake. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, they would be, so, and, we have all these nomenclature things. But still, the idea that the whale is one of the earliest things mentioned, I think, Doug, you said it before the show started, the evolutionists think that the whale evolution is one of their strongest points. And we think that it's one of our strongest points. How really, when you start looking at the evidence and what really needs to happen for what they say has happened, it's an amazing leap of faith, I think, that to get from point A to point B to point C to point F.
Oh, I sort of liken it to driving a bus down the road and then into the water and having the bus turn into a submarine.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's the sort of type of changes that would have had to have happened for whale evolution to take place. And I remember years ago, this is actually what really got me started on being interested in creation in the beginning. It was actually the preacher on the radio that talked about, how did the nose of the dolphin and the whale go from the front of the nose to the back of the head?
Right. Because both of those animals, I think the dolphin as well, they believe that they came from a land animal originally. And then obviously they believe everything started in the sea, and then certain creatures went out back on the land, and then they went back into the sea. Okay? That's what it is. I mean,
and you have a relatively short time period in terms of evolution to make that all happen. And so that is was the thing that really got me started thinking about all of this many years ago.
Was it your first book? I remember
1967. Yeah, and so you have, and this argument I think is still valid. It's you have to have a creature that loses its feet and develops flippers and fins. Mm-hmm. It would have had to grown a fluke for a tail.
Or did the hind legs turn into a fluke for the tail? I was reading something in one of the articles. It sounded like the hind legs evolved or into a fluke, and a fluke is an interesting structure. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. Yeah. But it's not like a passive thing like a fishtail.
Right.
It actually has muscles and things. It does all kinds of neat stuff, But
and then you have the characteristic of it being able to dive into great depths without getting the bends.
Yeah. And they talk about like what a dolphin could dive maybe 300 meters, but a whale, some of the whale can dive almost 3,000 meters.
Right. Yeah.
That's incredible. And then how they go down there, because they actually collapse their lung when they're going down there, so they don't have any oxygen to get hydrogen or get the the hydrogen to get bubbling out, you know, to get the bends type of thing. I was reading about that. I went, I didn't know that. That was kind of it's one of those things that it's fascinating. You think about the stuff that the design elements that are in this whale is, and it is design. I mean, you look at, because the evolutionary standard, Doug, it all has to be done by random chance. I mean, why would you design, or why would something happen with no common sense reason for it, thousands and even hundreds of thousands or millions of years before it was needed? This is the thing I've never understood how they can believe this. They anthropomorphize natural selection.
Right. Yeah. They make it into.
They make it into a designer, and it can't design based on what they're telling us, random chance. You know, they're saying that certain things in nature would program or cause things to happen, but there has to be some kind of a link, some kind of connection. But some of this stuff I can't even figure out even why there would be a connection like that.
Right. Now there's an article. This article talks about a particular new fossil that they found. Of course, what they try to do is they find all these different creatures and then put them in a little sequence, so that they can show a progression
like
from one creature to another. And
like our infamous fork to spork or spoon to spork, you know, remember that one?
Yeah.
We did that years ago.
Yeah, you could have forks evolving into spoons because you can line them up in a certain sequence.
They're both made out of metal. They both used to eat food or whatever. So they must have evolved from one another. Or maybe
So here's this Peruvian fossil. It's called Peregocetus.
Yeah,
Peregocetus.
Yeah.
And we're going to go seek the Peregocetus. And see, it's supposed to be called a amphibious whale. An evolutionary myth has really dived to a new low. And it may be considered amphibious because it appears to possibly have webbed feet for swimming. Okay, and so could definitely walk on land and possibly also swim the water.
But there's no fossil evidence that there was webbed feet. It just that the bone structure could actually possibly be that way. But I like his point in there, Doug. He said, well, based on this criterion, otters, if we found otters at the fossil record, or sea lions, they're basically evolving into whales.
That's right, yeah.
I mean, really, you know, it seems nonsensical when you put it in those light, but it's amazing how you can delude yourself into thinking certain things. If you go into you go into out on a limb, and you put one premise next to another, and pretty soon you're so far out here, you don't realize you're ready to fall off, and that limb's going to break.
Really, all these evolutionary stories are what they are great white throne practice. This is where somebody is practicing what they're going to say to God when they stand before Him and have to give an account for Him.
What? Yeah. Okay.
So why, if there isn't a God, then why should you care what anybody believes? It doesn't matter. Why are you so evangelistic in your outreach to convert people to your atheism?
Well, I would say they were hell bent on evangelizing for evolution, and I mean that in all intents and purposes. They don't understand, because it is a religion. When you really go down to the polemics, the passion, the vitriol that's hurled at creationists by these people who believe in this, because, Doug, they have nothing else.
They don't have anything.
Yeah, there's nothing else. You know, what's the old, and it still holds true to, I can't remember who said it, I always forget, but that evolution is the only thing to help you be an intellectually fulfilled atheist.
Right, and so they're trying to be intellectually fulfilled, and it's really it's sort of like a seventh grader trying to intimidate somebody else with their bullying.
And that's usually what happens. So Doug, I remember in your book, I see that it was your first book, but where you actually made a list of all the things that had to happen.
Well,
for
yeah.
a land animal to turn into a whale. But more importantly, you have to have it's more complicated even than that. You have to have a sea animal turn into a land animal, and then the land animal turn back into a sea animal.
Right.
And that, to me, it stretches credibility beyond any reasonable factor of by tenfold. But didn't you have a whole list of things of what the thing you talk about the nostril had to go from the front to the top of the head.
That's right.
Then the hind legs or the had to evolve into flippers or into a fluke. You had to figure out how to get lungs that could collapse. You had to get a rib cage that's parallel rather than perpendicular to the spine, so that it can collapse down. It's an incredible thing. There's stuff, you had a whole list of them,
one other thing was the sonar.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, they have special sonar things. Then you have two different kinds of whales. You have toothed whales, but they also have baleen whales.
Baleen whales, yeah.
And so these are two different design structures that aren't present anywhere in mammalian creatures that are on land. Yep. And so before you have something that's needed in the water, you have to actually get rid of what was actually needed on land.
I know, yeah.
And so it doesn't work until everything works.
Yep, that's the old argument, the old Michael Behe and, if you will, William Dembski. Was it Dembski?
Right.
Not only did you have what's that? You had irreducible complexity, but you also had specified complexity.
Yeah.
That's what I thought was even the most, I think, damning indictment to evolution. It's not only that the stuff was irreducible, it's that each thing had to need something else for it to even have any function whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And they've tried for years to try to. They go with the scenarios where this could have been used for this before it was this, and none of them are very, very satisfactory examples. They're just, to me, it's the ultimate straw grasping. To me.
Yeah, Peregocetus was still capable of standing and even walking on land. It showed us some retention of small hooves and
small hooves, huh?
Yeah, and they speculated that its feet were webbed and swam like an otter. No soft tissue preservation was to indicate webbing was found, but the bone structure of the feet could have allowed it for it.
That's what I said. Yeah.
And so, the evidence that they have here is pretty sketchy. I liken it to this. You have real science where you set up an experiment, where you have a begetting condition, and you have certain methods that you're applying to this particular sample,
right.
And then you have a result, and you can track what happens throughout the experiment. Well, here you don't have an experiment; you have results of an experiment. And so you really don't have something that's scientifically solid.
Okay.
So you have what you find in the present, and you make up a story as to how it got there. And that's really what evolution is doing, is that you have all these storytelling that is going on about geology, about biology, and trying to classify things by homology, which is by function. And in this particular case, we've got some things unique to whales and dolphins, such as baleen and these different kinds of teeth that do not work on land animals. But they have the land animal type of...
so which one evolved first, the toothed whales or the baleen whales?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, really, they're both whales, and they have two entirely different eating structures. Teeth. Well, because I imagine the toothed whales probably eat like fish and things like that, and the baleen is like what are they? Was it kelp and what it filters
plankton,
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Charles Darwin, he wrote in his book, or first book edition of The Origin of Species, about that black bears had been seen swimming for hours with widely open mouths, thus catching, like a whale, insects in the water. Even in so extreme a case as this, if the supplies of insects were constant, and if better adapted competitors didn't already exist in the country, I can see no difficulty in a race of bears being rendered by natural selection more and more aquatic in their structure and habits, with larger and larger mouths till a creature was produced as monstrous as a whale. This was in The Origin of Species, this revered book that changed history. This is this kind of nonsense that Charles Darwin proposed.
Yeah, he was ridiculed so much for it. He actually took it out of the subsequent editions. I don't, as far as I know, has it been put back in? I don't.
Well, he privately believed that.
He still believed it. Well, because he was smart. He used natural selection and a variation, which we can see in the biological record, and he extrapolated in a way, and he very sparingly, but I think he still believed it was the I call Lamarckianism,
That's right, yeah.
Where the old idea, I remember when I was growing up, I was in the Catholic school, the idea of a giraffe kept stretching his neck to get higher leaves, the neck would eventually evolve into a longer neck. That's Lamarckianism. That's what we call it malarkeyism. Or the idea that if you cut off rats' tails enough times, ultimately it's going to grow into a tailless rat, We know that's bunk. But Darwin believed that, although he didn't promote it as much. That was he was smart in that regard. But there were certain parts of his book that has those, that does have those things in it. But he kind of hid it a little bit, kind of like this bear thing. It sounds to me like he still believed it. Come on, open your mouth wide. You're going to evolve into a big. Was that the wide mouth frog?
Yeah, dude.
The wide mouth frog.
But, the reproduction of whales is a unique thing, too.
Yeah.
And, the whale is born underneath the water. And so at the very first start, this whale's got to be able to swim up to the top and surface so it could get its first breath of air. So, there's all sorts of things like that, which are...
Do you know how deep they usually breed, the whales? I didn't see that in the article, so I was curious. I was just wondering, because they said that the baby whales cannot go quite as deep as the parents.
That's right. Well, they're more on the surface. In fact, when my kids and I were on a whale watch in San Diego, that's actually what they were doing when they were in the water. You could see what was going on a little bit. Okay.
What comes naturally, man.
Yeah, but that was really what they do it on the surface. So so when the whale is born, it would be close to the surface, so that the baby whale.
But they still have to swim because they're still out in fairly deep water, even though they're on the surface.
Yeah, they're not going to go up on land to.
No.
So they have to be designed to do that, and that's different than this purported bear that would
proto-bear, or the Peregocetus or whatever, which is a proto-whale, which, at best it's going to be amphibious, but again, the guy was right. He says, well, then every amphibious type creature, from like sea lions, otters, all these things, but basically they're proto-whales. If they got found in the fossil record, they'd be. What reminds me, Doug? It reminds me of the missing links, so-called. We believe you either have humans or you have apes, and it's remarkable how you don't find extinct orangutans in the fossil record. You actually do, probably. It's called Lucy, probably, or something.
Yeah.
Not her, but I mean something like that. It's amazing all these animals we have. You don't see any of these because they put them in the missing link department. It sounds like that's what they're doing here with the whale. The same kind of nonsense,
Now, continuing on the reproduction part, there's the conundrum of internal testicles.
Yeah.
And so this is the testicle test, I guess.
Testicle,
So the streamlined bodies of male cetaceans lack external testicles. Instead, the testicles are inside the body. In most mammals, even sea lions, the testicles are outside the body because sperm production normally requires a temperature that's several degrees below the normal body temperature. In this case, the veins carry cool blood from the dorsal fin and flukes to the testicles, where it flows through a network of veins that pass between arteries carrying warm blood in the opposite direction. The arterial blood is therefore cooled before it reaches the testicles. That's really, so you have a totally different mechanism for the reproduction of,
Yeah, what did that evolve from?
yeah.
Because everything else, you're right. The testicles are outside the body because, yeah, you need a variant of temperature. But this one, it's actually inside the body, cools it down enough so that it actually is functioning. I thought it was fascinating, too, the mother, you know, she has, her nipples are inside, there's like slits.
Yeah.
And the baby's, like, it's under pressure and it's under the water, and it forces the milk, and it's really thick like yogurt, man. It's really, it's a, you know, to get them, and I mean, why? I mean, we know why when you see the whale, but why would that have ever been evolved from something? I mean, it makes no sense. There's so many things like that. Doug, I think the whole idea of sexual reproduction, it makes no sense. Asexual is much more efficient. Why would you ever have sexual reproduction? You know, I mean, as far as
It's really hard to conceive.
yeah, hard to conceive. You know what I'm saying? It makes. Why would you have that from a random element of chance as opposed to a designer? You know, I mean, obviously, it's a strong desire in all living creatures to reproduce and have that kind of thing, but there's also a pleasurable response in it. It's like, wow, you know, but still, the amoebas and the asexual reproducers do just fine. They split, they cut in half, and you know they got two of
It's a
them.
whole lot simpler.
Yeah, a whole lot simpler.
but,
Sexual reproduction is not simple. You know.
But I was reading where there was a organism that they found that was surviving even since 1952 in a can, and
What, a tin can or
a
something?
tin can, and
Okay.
apparently this particular organism was so resilient that even radiation couldn't kill it.
What is it? It sounds like some out of a sci-fi
And
movie.
they found as it was reproducing, if you irradiated it, there were enzymes in it that would actually take the damaged RNA and DNA and actually reassemble it back.
Really? What kind of an organism is this thing? Is it a bacteria or what
It's a
is it?
bacteria, and
Wow.
I think it was called radio something.
Is it harmful or is it?
Yeah, it's a nasty little bug.
Ugh.
But
Yay.
in the event, I was going to mention this little fork to spoon analogy that the evolutionists do with whales, because there are
Got the drawings
we've got some drawings of the different types of classifications. It starts out with a little creature that is called the Indohyus, and then there's a Peregocetus, Ambulocetus, a Myocetus, a Cuchiocetus, a Rhodocetus, a Dorion, a Basilosaurus, and the blue whale. Now, these are easily, if you take a look at them, they have all sorts of different anatomical characteristics.
Anatomical?
Yeah, something like
Easy
that.
for me to say, huh?
Anatomical characteristics
Yeah.
that are unique to each of these organisms, which enable them to perform specific functions in their environment.
Now, are any of these living today, except besides the blue whale? Are these all extinct creatures?
I believe that they're all
I think
extinct
they are, too.
creatures. And, you know, that fits within the norm of what the creationists would expect to see, because you have buried in the fossil record. Now, the question is, why, if these are found buried in the fossil record, they're buried in land, spots in the land, how do they get there, except that they were buried in
By water action.
by water action during the flood.
Yeah, that's the flood, yep.
And so, you know, this fits our model of we find in a flood model where they would be in this particular sequence. Now, I don't know where these fit in the fossil record. If you dig up a fossil, it's generally you're going to dig it up on the surface. It's not going
Pretty
to
much,
be something.
Some of them they have to dig up. They might see a bone. Some of the big, more, like dinosaurs and maybe some of these other ones. But I don't know. Do they find fossils of blue whales?
That I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
I know that there are whale fossils.
I know that.
And I know there was one they found in California that was like standing on end.
Really?
And so-
Wow.
So it's kind of it sort of shows how much of a water action had taken place
Sure.
in this burial. It would have been quite a
Wow.
catastrophe.
Where's that at, Doug?
I think it's on the California coast.
California
someplace.
coast? Wow, that's neat.
So I'm going to have to look that up and see if I can find a picture of that.
That'd be
But
great.
that's cool. But any of these, if you find them in a layer of rock, you're not going to find them in sequence underneath each other.
No. Yeah, and there's nothing in the rocks that says, okay, 65 million BC.
Yeah. And since they're all
225
mammals,
million BC.
they're all in the top layer anyway.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, let's see here. This one here, you got the Basilosaurus. Saurus means lizard.
Yeah.
So is this a reptile?
no,
Okay.
it's not a reptile.
It's not a reptile.
If it's a mammal, then
It is a mammal.
then it has to be something that is recent,
I was wondering, why they call it Saurus.
Well, Saurus makes it sound a little bit more prehistoric, if you know what I mean.
Well, I know it usually means like Saurus is
Exactly.
lizard, it's a Greek or Latin.
Well, if you take a look at it, it doesn't look at all like a lizard,
Yeah.
or a dinosaur.
Well, neither did Ichthyosaurus either. Ichthyosaurus looks like a
That's
fish.
right, yeah.
And Elastosaurus, Plesiosaurus, they look quite different too. So Chronosaurus looks, it's got a smaller head than a Chronosaurus.
Right, yeah.
So I just didn't know if it was reptilian or mammalian. And I don't know how you can tell that just with bones.
You really can't. But
I don't know.
but they're interesting creatures,
Yep.
and we have no problem with extinction. Extinction
Yeah,
is all
yeah.
part of what we see happening in the fossil record in this fallen world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the history of the world is extinction, not evolution, not things evolving upward. Notice how they go from the smallest to biggest at the top.
Right.
Yeah.
No, does that really, that you don't find that in the fossil record?
Not at all. It's a myth.
So I hope that you don't take this whale of a tale to heart. That whale evolution really is all what it's made out to be, because I think that it's a whale of a whopper.
Well, we think it's a whale of a whopper. It's whale of a tail, and really, it's a religion for atheists. And the point of it is, why believers subscribe to this when the science really doesn't hold up to it at all, Doug. You just look at the evidence straightforwardly, and you go, they're just lining things up because they look small and big, but it doesn't really add up at all, Doug. So.
Well, we'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.